Okay, let's take a look at what happens when this piece of code, this module is executed. Okay, so let's see what happens. This is the first instruction that gets executed. Declare num1 comma num2 as integers. So in our memory, inside the memory, num1 will be given some space, some memory space, where an integer value can be stored, and num2 will also be given some space. It will be allocated some memory where an integer value can be stored. So once this instruction is executed, then this instruction is executed. Declare name as a string. What this is going to do is, when this instruction gets executed, this is going to name is going to be allocated some memory space, and this is where a string value can be stored, right? Then comes this instruction. Num1 is being given a value 5, so we're going to update 5 here. Num2 is being given a value 10, so we're going to update 10 here, and then we are making a procedure call. So this time what we are saying is, this instruction is saying that go to the procedure input num. So go to this procedure. So the control is going to be transferred to this procedure, and there are two parameters being passed, num1 and num2. These are the two parameters being passed. What should be noted here is that the first parameter, which is num1, this first parameter is being passed by value. By value means that a copy of num1 is going to be made. So a copy of this is going to be made. A copy of this is going to be made, and this copy will be used by it's going to be pointed to by this parameter x. So x is now going to point to a copy of num1. X is now going to point to a copy of num1. The second parameter, which is num2, is being passed by reference. So y will not point to a copy of num2. Y will in fact point directly towards num2. Which means what? Which means if we modify the value of x, we are only going to be modifying this copy, right? But if we modify the value of y, we are going to be modifying this memory location, which is also pointed to by num2, right? So we are going to be directly affecting num2. If we are going to modify y, we are going to be directly affecting num2, but if we are going to modify x, we are only going to be modifying this copy. Okay, so let's keep moving, right? Within this procedure, when this procedure gets executed, these are the two instructions that get executed. So the first instruction that gets executed is input x. Let's assume that the user types a value 65, right? So the user types 65, so x gets a value of 65, which basically means what? Which means that this copy here of this is the copy, right? And this is what gets modified. So we're going to write 65 here now. So this gets updated with 65, and then the next instruction inputs the value for y. Let's assume that the user provides a value 77, right? This time we're trying to give y a value of 77. So this means that this is the location that's going to get modified, because y is pointing towards this location. So in fact num2 is going to get updated, right? Even though we are changing the value of y, num2 is going to get updated because y is also pointing to the same location. So now this becomes 77. Okay, then this instruction gets executed. Output num1. So if this is our output window, let this be our output window, right? When this instruction gets executed, the value of num1 is going to be output, which is 5, right? But when this instruction gets executed, the value of num2 is going to be output, which is 77. Okay, let's do another quick example. Let's see what happens when this piece of code gets executed. Okay, so let me quickly draw my memory here. So I'm just going to draw my memory. Okay, when this instruction gets executed, num1 is allocated memory space and num2 is allocated memory space. when this instruction gets executed, ABG is allocated memory space, right? And then when this instruction gets executed, we're basically making a call now. We're making a call to this procedure called input num. So the control is going to get transferred here, right? And what we can see here in this definition is that input num is expecting two parameters. The first one should be an integer and the second one should also be an integer. The first one is being passed by reference and the second one is also being passed by reference. So num1 is the first parameter that is being passed by reference, which means that this x will be pointing directly towards num1, and this num2 is also being passed by reference, which means this y is going to be directly pointing towards this memory location num2, right? So when the user gives when this procedure executes and the user gives a value of x, let's say 50, when x becomes 50, that means this is updated. And when the user types a value of y, for example 70, then when y is given a value of 70, that basically means that num2 is given a value of 70. This gets updated. Okay, and then this procedure finishes. When this procedure is complete, then the control is transferred back to the main module. Okay, in the main module, the next instruction to be executed is this instruction. Okay, so now the call is being made to the calculate average procedure. And when we go and take a look here at the definition, we can see that it is accepting three parameters: integer, integer and real. So the first parameter is integer and it is being passed by value. This is the first parameter, num1, that is being passed, and it is being passed by value. So a copy of num1 is going to be made. A copy of num1 is going to be made, and this s is going to point towards that copy. So s will point towards this copy. And then the second parameter, which is num2, is also being passed by a value. So a copy of num2 is going to be made, and this t is going to be pointing towards that copy. And the third parameter, which is avg, is being passed by reference, which means what? Which means that this z is going to point directly towards avg. So this z is going to directly point towards avg. Okay, now within this procedure, the instruction that gets executed is actually calculating this formula, right? Z equals s plus t divided by 2. So z equals s plus t divided by 2, right? And s has a value of 50, y has a value, t has a value of 70. 50 plus 70 divided by 2 equals what? That equals 60, right? So this is the value that's going to be assigned to z. So z becomes z becomes equals to 60, means that this is what gets updated. avg gets updated. Now that this procedure has executed, the control is transferred back to the main module, and the next procedure that is being called is the display average procedure. Okay, so this is where the control is going to get transferred to now, from here to this procedure, right? And this procedure is expecting a single parameter, right, which should be of real data type, and it's being passed by value. Okay, so this is the parameter that's being passed, right? avg. A copy of avg is going to be made, because this is being passed by value, right? So a copy of avg is going to be made, and this result is going to point towards this copy, right? And finally, this is what's going to be, when this instruction gets executed, we are going to output result. So if this is our output window, the value held by this variable result is going to be output. So this is the value that's going to be output, and this is what we're going to see on the screen. If you've observed what this small program is doing, it's basically calculating the average, right? It's just taking two numbers as input, then it's calculating the average, and it's finally showing the result, right? So I hope you understand how things work when parameters are passed by value or they are passed by reference.